Hey everyone, this is Chef Stephanie here at Turn Farm's Teaching Kitchen, and I figured I would show everybody how I make an omelet. A lot of times, I'm sure you've all heard at some point or another that pretty much chefs are distinguished by how they make their omelets, or like that's the ultimate epitome of a chef test. And a lot of that reason is because it's that way you can really tell whether or not you have control over the heat in a pan and how gently you can cook something with finesse. So it has a lot of truth to the kind of tall tale that making an omelet for a job can happen. So what I have are 3 eggs, some olive oil, and salt. That's all I'm doing. Obviously at home when you make omelets you can throw in different toppings, you can add pepper, you can do whatever the heck you want. It's not a problem. So first thing I'm gonna do is actually turn my oven on, or my stovetop on, and I'm gonna put it on low heat and just put a little bit of oil in the pan. I always do really low heat whenever I make an omelet because I want to really control what I'm doing, and I find that it's a lot gentler on the product. So I just go low and slow with my eggs. It does take a while, but I think it's totally worth it. So in the meantime, while that pan is heating up, I'm gonna throw a little bit of salt into my eggs and I'm gonna whisk them away. I always want to whisk my eggs before I throw it into a pan, whether or not I'm making scrambled eggs or an omelet, because I want to make sure that I have my whites and my yolks fully mixed together. And I use my wrist movement to aerate them a little bit. The other thing is, I grew up in a household where my dad always threw water in the eggs. Some people do milk. And what that is supposedly doing is essentially giving you fluffier eggs. It's not really going to give you fluffier eggs, but it does add a little bit more water to the egg. So as it cooks and it steams, it can puff up a little bit. So if you like doing that, throw some water or some milk in there. I just like to aerate it by hand. And basically I whisk the bejesus out of it so that I get a ton of bubbles. And it's just really, a wonderful arm exercise, so I don't have to go to the gym later. But in the meantime, I'm going to check where my pan is. It should be minimally hot, and you can see all the lovely bubbles on the top of my eggs. I'm going to still whisk them a little bit more, but the reason why I whisk it so heavily is I kind of like that souffle texture of it. I like it being lighter. If you're not that type of person, you don't have to whisk it as much. It's that simple. So my pan is warm, but not overly hot. And I'm using a rubber spatula to get all the eggs out of the bowl into the saute pan. And what I'm going to do is let it cook, but I want to gently move my rubber spatula around the edges so that as it cooks, I start moving it around and I get the curds. That way, we're starting to scramble the eggs, essentially. You want to be relatively gentle with this because you don't want eggs to splosh all over the place, so you don't want to keep moving your saute pan up and down. And this way, too, you don't end up with that weird crust of egg that can happen on the side. I know that happens a lot when you're whisking eggs really quickly to make scrambled eggs. And you also want to make sure that as you work around the sides, you also get under with the rubber spatula, just because it's going to be cooking from all of the different surfaces, and you really don't want to have really overly cooked eggs in the center or something like that, because you're going to end up with potentially, some browning. And we're making a French omelet, so it's all about that heat control and getting a nice light color on the omelet. If you're making a Western style kind of Americanized omelet, kind of like you would get at Denny's or a diner, where it's folded in half and it's got that lovely brown crispy exterior, that's awesome. It's just not what we're doing. And basically what you would do for that is turn up the heat and just fold it in half. And I'm going to show you how to kind of roll it and get this oblong shape that's very traditional for French omelets. So you'll start to notice that we're starting to get some curds, and it's starting to look a little bit more like scrambled eggs at this point. And In professional kitchens, usually we do this a lot faster. We do turn up the heat more than this because we don't want to be standing over one pan of omelets for forever, but it's a really good way to highlight what we're actually doing. And besides a rubber spatula, a lot of people actually use chopsticks or prongs or something like that. You just don't want to use metal and scrape your pan. But what that does is help get you really fine curds, which adds to a really gentle, mild texture to it. So it's still a little liquid, so we're going to keep doing this, but we definitely have what looks more like scrambled eggs. And you don't want to rush this part just because you want to know exactly where your eggs are, and you don't want this to go too quickly and then end up with scrambled eggs instead of an omelet. So I'm just pushing down the sides, and now that it's starting to set up and there's not a lot of liquid moving around, I'm just, with that little remaining liquid, I'm just moving it around so that I get a flat surface and every area is covered, because you don't want a holy omelet. And I'm going to tuck at the sides. And this is the really key part to get a really lovely, smooth coat on the exterior of your omelet. It might be a little loud, but what you want to do is tap it. And what that does is help remove air bubbles from the surface. From here, I'm being a little impatient, so I'm going to turn up the heat. I'm going to put a little bit more salt on there for seasoning, just because I very lightly salted it when I was whisking. And this is a really great time if you wanted to add cheese or other fillings to the center. And usually what you want to do is put it in a row, so that as you roll it up, it's all in the center. So, check the edges. The other really important thing is to use a non-stick pan. It's very difficult to do this in a regular pan that's not non-stick. You can do it, it's just you're going to fight it more. So I'm going to turn it back down again, and it looks like I'm all set. So what I'm going to do is use the curvature of the pan to push down with the rubber spatula to start rolling my omelet. So I just like using gravity because it's there and we might as well. And from there, I want to slide it onto a plate. Obviously it does not look pretty right now, but we're just going to move it because this happens a lot. And basically we just turn it over, put it down. Usually we can season it with a little bit more olive oil, or we could put melted butter on it and some parsley, but that's it. Enjoy.